Let me tell you what we're going to do tonight. I feel strongly that your local church should be the best organization to work for in your city. That just in terms, forget the Christian God part for just a second. Just in terms of an organization, your local church should be the best run organization in your town. That people from Fortune 100, 500, and whatever companies, people that work in stores that we go to all the time and run businesses that all of us are familiar with. I just feel like they should be able to walk the halls of your church, not just on Sunday, but Monday through Friday, and see how the whole thing's being done and go, wow. Could I bring my leadership team here, and would you teach us how to run an organization? Because this is one well-run organization. I think that's how it should be, and it should be pretty easy for us. Because think about this. Everybody, this is kind of a stretch, but everybody that works for us is a Christian, right? I mean, that's the goal, right? That everybody that works in our organization is a Christian. So, and we're all on the same page when it comes to character and standards and honesty, right? So we kind of got that covered. You don't have to, have a seminar on ethics in the church and the staff. Hopefully you kind of come in with some presuppositions, right? We've got a book that's sort of the guide. We've got the Bible. Not only that, we have, pardon this use of this phrase, we have an incredible product that we believe makes an incredible difference. I saw a video not too long ago from a huge chain. You all have shopped there before. And the CEO was giving a pep talk. And I mean, these people were clapping and jumping up and down. He was a very motivational speaker. There's about 1,000 people in the room. And basically, I sat there and I listened. And I thought, boy, he's motivational. Almost makes me to work for that company. But I thought, oh, give me a break. They're selling stuff. They're selling stuff that anybody could sell. They're selling stuff that other people sell. And one day he's going to get fired because, it's just corporate America and something's going to go wrong. And he's going to get fired. And then somebody else is going to be there. And it's going to be another bunch of store managers. And I mean, I'm glad that they're, trying to pump up their people. But they're selling stuff. We have a product that we believe has the potential to change people's lives forever. In fact, not only that, most of us use the product ourselves, don't we? We were raised in homes where our parents used the product. The Christianity was something that we were raised in. And not only that, we were raised in the local church. So in terms of integrity, in terms of commitment, in terms of work ethic, in terms of balance, in terms of putting family first, in terms of all those things that people in most jobs struggle with, we should come to work having most of those things whipped just because we're Christians and just because of the values we bring. Your local church should be the best run organization. I don't mean Sunday. I'm talking about Monday through Friday. Should be the best run organization in your town. And I think our local campuses should be the best run organizations in our town. And unfortunately, that's not the case. I mean, maybe your church is different from the average church, but chances are there aren't a bunch of business guys knocking on the door going, will you come to our company and teach us how to be more efficient? Will you come to our company and teach our people how to have the work ethic you do? I mean, my gosh, the work ethic's unbelievable. Will you come teach us how to have balance in our lives? Because it's like in your organization, people like work, and then they go home and they're family, then they work, and there seems to be this incredible balance. Would you come teach us how to have margin, Probably didn't happen. In fact, my local church experience, I've met some of the most dysfunctional people I've ever met in my life, and they were on church staff. And I would say, and again, to my case, I would go to my dad and say, Dad, why do they work here? And I was new. I just got out of seminary. I thought you were supposed to hire like really competent, talented, motivated, good work ethic, educated, could speak in complete sentence kinds of people. I mean, what we're doing is so important. And, and again, he was in a system where, he kind of inherited it. And, we talk about that and laugh about it now. And he would say, well, and then I would go to my boss and I'd say, why is that guy here? Why? Well, and he had a hard time. And, and I'm something like, so is he like a mission project or he's an employee? Why is he here? I'm not exaggerating. And you have people like that maybe on your staff or in the past. They didn't come with you, hopefully, or they're not sitting next to you or anything, or they don't think you're that person. But and I've met so many lazy people on staff. I've met pastors that are just lazy. They're just lazy. They preach old sermons, they don't study, they play golf all the time, they travel all the time, and then, they get these, I hate this, they get like extra weeks to go do ministry, which means go preach somewhere else and get an honorarium. That's what that means, right? And and only the pastor gets that stuff, and you're like, that just destroys the culture. I mean, again, I could go on and on and tell stories just like you can, but I think that the organization, I'm not talking about worship service, the organization needs to be incredible because we have everything going for us. We're all on the same page, got the same value, should have an incredible work ethic. I think, the scripture speaks to all that. So when I meet with our new employees, and about once every month and a half, we have a new employee orientation, and I sit down with everybody that's come onto our staff new at all 3 campuses, and it's usually about 8 people. It's not like lots of people, about 8 people. And the first thing I tell them is this. I say, my goal is for this to be the best job you have ever had. My goal is for this to be the best job you ever have in your life. Now, I know you're not going to work here forever, maybe you will. But and you may go on to bigger and better things, and one day we'll retire your cube and put a little thing across there and go, that's where so-and-so used to work. He's now the what? I'm not saying you won't have better jobs in terms of opportunity, but when you look back on working here, I'm not talking about Sunday. I'm not talking about, the worship. I'm talking about you get up on Monday and come to work. I want this to be the best job you have ever had. And then we talk about the things we've tried to do organizationally and culturally to make it the best job a person has ever had. Because across this organization, we're not just committed to having an incredible show on Sunday morning. We're not just committed to having an incredible, look at all the colors in the children's ministry and cool websites. I mean, we love all that stuff. But behind all that, the sort of the invisible part, the part that nobody sees unless they're in the halls Monday through Friday, I just think as the church ought to have the most well-run, efficient, incredible organization in the world. I think the world should be knocking on our door saying, teach us how to do that. Now, sometimes, and maybe you've received this as well, sometimes I get criticized because, it seems so corporate, and maybe you've been criticized the same way, and I love that criticism. Because generally the people that think our church is too corporate have pretty lousy cultures, and everybody's having a quiet time every day, and they got their Bibles, and everybody's singing. I don't know where he is. I'm sure he's doing ministry. And sometimes things get really loose, and let me tell you what happens. Listen. And that's fine. Doesn't mean it's broken. It doesn't mean that God doesn't use it. But when incredibly sharp, gifted leaders from other organizations come into those organizations, it just drives them crazy. Because disorganization, or the appearance of disorganization, or the appearance of apathy toward organization sends a signal to some of the best leaders and the leaders that you need, not only on your staff, but in your volunteer forces. So consequently, I don't mind being criticized in terms of the corporate part, because there is a corporate side to every church. If you have a checking account, you have a corporation. If you're going to have a corporation, have a good one. If it's going to have the name of Jesus associated with it, have a great one. You don't wear stupid religious Christian t-shirts, do you? No, you try to find, if you're going to get a t-shirt that has Jesus on it, have a great t-shirt. If you're going to have a corporation and you have one, you are a legal entity. If you're going to have one and you have to have one, have a great one. And for the next few minutes, I want to talk about 2 gifts that every single staff member needs to give every single staff member on your staff. 2 gifts that every single staff member needs to give every single staff member. And specifically, if you are a senior pastor, I believe you've got to carry the torch when it comes to this value. You've got to be the one that sets the pace, because as we'll see in just a minute, to the degree that you as a senior pastor or a senior leader in your division, but specifically senior pastors, to the degree that you embrace this, that will be reflected in the rest of your organization. And when I work with churches or consult with churches or even visit churches where this seems to be lacking, 9 times out of 10, you talk to the senior pastor or talk to staff about the senior pastor, and it's lacking with him or with her. So let's jump into the notes, and we'll fill in a few blanks. It says right above the number 1, it says, to maintain relational integrity necessary to operate as a team, we must choose to trust and be trustworthy, is the blank. We must choose to trust and be trustworthy. The two gifts that we must give each other every single day, Monday through Friday. Sundays don't count because Sundays we're all on our best behavior. Monday through Friday, aren't we? I mean, we all smile on Sunday because it's Sunday. Monday through Friday, two gifts we've got to give each other every single day are the gifts of trust. I am going to give you trust, and I'm going to give you trustworthiness. Letter A. Often there are unexplainable gaps between what we expect people to do and what they actually do. Is that true? Oftentimes there are unexplainable gaps. You said you'd be here at 3, it's 3:30. You said you'd turn in 5, you turned in 2. You said you'd have everybody registered, everybody's not registered. You said that the song was going to knock it out of the park. I wish we hadn't even done it. You know what happened? Oftentimes there are gaps between what we expect and what happens. And number one, and this is kind of the whole deal right here. Number one, we choose what we place in that gap. We choose what we place in that gap. When there's a gap between what I expect and what you deliver, when there's a gap between what you said is going to happen and what really happens, when there's a gap, it doesn't happen. I, as an individual, as a staff member, I choose what to put in that gap. Now, we don't think that way. We think, no, we just react based on prior experience. We react based on what happened in our last church. We react based on our personalities. The next thing you know, that gap is filled with something we haven't even thought about. But here's what this whole talk is about. When there is a gap, when there's a trust gap, every single time there's a trust gap, we make a decision as to what we put in that gap. Number 2, our choice determines the integrity of the relationship. Number 3, we can choose to fill them, that's the gaps, we can choose to fill the gaps with trust or suspicion. Every single time there's a gap, we place in that gap, I trust you. If you're late, there must be a good reason. Or I bet you were goofing off and didn't watch the time. If you were late, I bet there's a real good reason that you're late. Hey, you're late and you're late all the time, or I expected you to be late. You said that song was going to knock it out of the park and it did knock it out of the park. I'm trusting there's a really good reason and I'm going to withhold judgment. No, that's exactly what I expected. There's something up. What's going on? Every single time there's a gap, we make a decision. We don't think of it as a decision. We make a choice. Am I going to fill the gap with trust or am I going to fill it with suspicion? Here's a quote from Reggie McNeil, and it's a little bit long, but I love this quote. He says this: teams use trust as currency. If it is in short supply, then the team is poor. If trust abounds, the members of the team have purchase power with each other. Now listen to this next phrase. With each other, to access each other's gifts, talents, energy, creativity, and love. If in your staff you have a hard time leveraging the gifts, the talent, the creativity, and the love of other staff members, chances are you have a trust problem. The second part, the development of trust then becomes significant leadership strategy. Trust creates the load limits on the relational bridges among team members. And as believers, number 4, we've been called to trust. Now listen to this passage of Scripture. You've heard it 100 times. Somebody said it in your wedding. Somebody sang it in your wedding. Maybe you quoted it in your wedding, and then we don't go back to it. Listen to this. This is jumping right in the middle of 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. And then here's one. It keeps no records of wrongs. Verse 6. Love does not delight in evil. Aha, caught you again. Aha, that's what I expected. I knew they would do that. But rejoices with the truth. And then here's the part that has always been a mystery. Verse 7. It always protects, always what? What's the word? What's the word right before it? Always trust. The New American Standard says this: believes all things. You go, wait a minute, wait. I can't believe all things. See, this is my point. Trust is a choice. Trust is a choice. And when we fill the gap with anything other than trust, we fill our organizational culture with something that ultimately erodes the organizational culture, regardless of your strategy, your style, your method, or anything else. In Luke 6:31, you know this verse, treat others the way you want to be treated. What if we filled in this gap and said this? What if we began to trust others the way we want to be what? Isn't do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Isn't that kind of fill in the blank verse? Love others as you want to be loved. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Leaders, trust other staff members the way you want to be trusted. Letter B, let's be realistic. There are two things that make it difficult for us to trust. Number one, who I am. Number two, what I see. Who I am, what I see. Who I am means that some of us are suspicious by nature. You're suspicious by nature because of the home you were raised in. You're suspicious by nature because you went into church world as a very, very trusting person and you got burned over and over and over and over. And now anything that even begins to feel a little bit like that previous church and your antennas go up and you assume the worst. You can't help that. You were betrayed by someone you love. Something happened in your childhood. Some of us are just suspicious by nature. In other words, as soon as there's a gap, our knee-jerk reaction is, uh-oh. Our knee-jerk reaction isn't, oh, I'm sure they've got a good excuse, a good reason. I'm sure, I bet she was sick. I bet something happened. I just believe the best. Now, let's just be real honest, and I'll vote too. How many of you would say, you know what? On the scale of, fives in the middle, I tend to tip toward being kind of a little bit of a suspicious person when it comes to gaps. How many of you would you say? By nature, come way high. Yeah, that's good. The rest of you, gosh, God bless you. That's awesome. Now, we'll get to you in just a second. That's okay. Here's the thing. The reason we have a hard time trusting is because of either who we are, that's our past, that's the way we're wired. Sometimes leaders, you just have learned to be careful over time, and what we see. When I see a person being untrustworthy, I tend not to trust them. Wow, somebody needs to write that down, right? In other words, if you are untrustworthy, if you're late for the last 5 meetings and you're late for the 6th one, I'm not going to cut you a lot of slack. I'm thinking, well, there he goes again, there she goes again. The things that make it hard for me to trust are who I am, that's the look in the mirror, and what I see, that's the look out the window. Both of those things. Letter C, consequently, when it comes to trust, there are 3 commitments we need to make. I'm going to give you 3 commitments on the trust side and 3 commitments on the trustworthiness side. The 3 commitments that I need to make in terms of embracing trust as a value in our culture is this. Number 1, when there's a gap between what I expect and what I experience, I'll fill it with trust. Here's my commitment to you. From this point forward, when there's a gap between what I expect and what I actually experience, I'm going to fill it with trust. That is, I'm making the decision, I'm choosing to believe the best about you. Number 2, when I observe other people filling a gap with suspicion, this is tough, I'm going to come to your defense. When I catch another staff member filling that gap with suspicion, you know how she is. Well, you know what her other church, you know what her son told me. When I catch another staff member trying to fill that gap with suspicion, I'm making a commitment to you. I'm coming to your defense. And then number 3, if what I experience or see begins to erode my trust, I'll come directly to you about it. If what I see over and over begins to erode my trust, I'm committing that I will come directly to you about it. Now let me just pause and ask you this question. Would that have made a difference in your staff experience this past year if everybody on your staff had just followed through on those 3 simple commitments? See, I guarantee you there are people in this room, and especially with this many church leaders, that the reason you're not at your prior church, possibly, is because somebody suspected, and they talked all about you, but they never talked to you. And when they finally came and talked to you, there was so much damage was done. You had lost confidence in them, and they had ruined their confidence in you because they built such a case against you internally, and it spilled over to other people, but they never came to you directly. You've heard the horror stories like I have. People losing their jobs over things they were never even confronted about. And by the time they're confronted, it's too late. The decision's been made, and they don't even get to defend themselves because there's been conversations in the background. There was a lack of trust, and people decided they'd fill in the gap with whatever they wanted to fill it in with, but there was never the discussion. What if the only thing we did going forward from this conference is make these 3 commitments to each other? You know what? When there's a gap, I'm going to fill it with trust. When I see other people trying to fill it with something else, I'm going to come to your defense. I'm backing you up. And when I sense that I'm not getting what the expectation you've set, when I'm not experiencing what you said I can expect, then the first person I'm going to talk to is you. Imagine that. And the thing is, this isn't like super spirituality. This is just kind of basic, isn't it? I mean, this is a little bit 101. And yet, oftentimes, it's so uncommon in the church. But here's the deal. If you are at all committed to creating a staff culture that's healthy, if you're at all committed to creating a staff culture that when people that attend your church are around your staff and sense what's going on among staff members, if that's important to you, you can't do it without trust, regardless of how talented people are, regardless of what your program's like, regardless of what your budget's like. If you don't have an element of trust, if it doesn't saturate your culture, nothing else is really going to work for very long. But that's just half the equation. Roman numeral 2 is there's the trustworthiness factor. I've got to make 2 promises to you. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to be trustworthy. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to be trustworthy. Roman numeral 2. Being trustworthy is not the equivalent of being flawless. Being trustworthy is not the equivalent of being flawless in character or performance. It's not about being perfect. Now, I'll let you feel this in yourself. Being trustworthy means to be worthy of trust. Isn't that neat? That's what the word means. Being trustworthy, it doesn't mean you're flawless. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you're not going to mess up. It doesn't mean you're not going to be late. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean any of that. Being trustworthy simply means I will be worthy of your trust. If you choose to trust me, I'm going to be worthy of your trust. On my notes, I wrote this. A trustworthy person addresses the gaps they've created. That's what a trustworthy person does. When I create a gap because I don't give you what you expect, I don't come through the way I promise. When I create a gap, a trustworthy person comes and addresses the gaps they've created. 3 commitments as it relates to being a trustworthy person. Number 1, I commit to do what I say I'll do, and when I don't, I'll tell you. I'm committing to do what I've promised I'll do, and when I don't, you won't hear it from anybody else before you hear it from me. Let me tell you, we had a great illustration of this, and I meant to ask John if I can use it, but I didn't, so I'll just use it anyway. John and I are friends. John is one of our staff members, works with Kid Stuff, and my daughter is one of the dancers in Kid Stuff. She's 11 years old. Her name is Allie. And so one night, we pick up Allie from Kid Stuff practice, and she was here, and we pick her up. It's a school night. We get her home. And I don't know how long we've been home, less than an hour, I think. And Sandra gets an email from John. And here's how the email went. I should have brought it to read it. It was to all the parents of all the Kid Stuff actors and dancers that were there that night. And the email went something like this. Dear parents, I want to apologize for what happened tonight at Kid Stuff practice. We know it's a school night. We know you take your time to get your kids here. We were not as organized as we should have been. I'm sure some of the kids felt like it was a waste of time. We really just did a poor time. We did a poor job with time management. I went on and on and on, apologizing for how poorly the Kid Stuff practice went and how he felt like we'd probably wasted some kids' time. They didn't even need to be here. We didn't use their time wisely. On and on he went. Apologized to all the parents. We got it the night after the Kid Stuff rehearsal. Now, John had a couple of options. Option number 1, just wait and see if I hear from anybody, right? Because if I don't hear from anybody, maybe the kids didn't know that they sat in the corner and played video games the whole time and nobody, maybe, but then if maybe I get a complaint, then I'll say, oh, you're right, I'm sorry. That was one option. His second option, had he been really sneaky, is I'm going to send this email out to all the parents except for Allie's parents. Right? I mean, why tell the pastor? He didn't even work. He's like, he's not a direct report. Why tell the pastor that we wasted his daughter's time? I mean, this is like a really poor reflection on Kid Stuff. It's a poor reflection on the church. Oh my gosh. We'll just don't send it to the Stanleys. Just send it to everybody else. And then if they find out, because you know what? When Allie came home, she never brought it up. Now, you know what? When I got this, I was overwhelmed. Now, as a senior pastor, senior leader, you got to run this through the grid of how you would have responded. I was so thrilled. In fact, the next Monday in staff meeting, I had him stand up. I said, hey, I got a story, and he didn't know what's going on. And I said, the kid stuff, and they had this horrible deal, and it didn't go well, and I kind of made it sound worse than it really was. And he's like, what is this, like moment of public humiliation, I said, let me tell you what John did. John owned it before anybody had a chance to complain. And not only did he own it before, in other words, there was a gap. Here's what we expect, here's what we experience. Gap. He owned it before anybody had a chance to complain, and he even allowed the senior pastor to get the email, and he could have easily taken my wife off that list. And I said to John, in front of the whole staff, John, that is extraordinary leadership, because trustworthiness is not about being flawless. Trustworthiness is, I'll do what I say I'm going to do, and when I don't, I'm going to be the one that tells you. You're going to hear it from me first. In fact, I told him, I said, you know what? As a result of that, I'm a parent too, okay, not just a pastor. I have more confidence in trusting my daughter to your care, because now I know if something goes wrong, I won't have to find out about it. I don't have to come searching around. I don't have to ask a bunch of questions. I just know from this point forward, you'll let me know before I have to find out from anybody else. You have increased your trust with me, not decreased it. He breathed a sigh of relief, and everybody clapped, and he sat down. Okay. So it's fun to be in staff meeting. The point is this. When it comes to trustworthiness, I commit to do what I say I'll do, and when I don't, you're going to hear it first from me. Have you made that kind of commitment to the other staff members on your team? Second commitment. I commit not to overpromise and underdeliver, but if it looks like that's where things are headed, I'll tell you. Now, speaking as a senior pastor, and the staff that works directly for me, they know this, and I bet you're the same way. I hate surprises. I hate them. Now, I don't mean birthday. I don't even really like that either, but that's the personality issue, I'm sure. But I don't, in other words, if something's going to be terrible, please let me know before I get there. And then it's terrible, and I'm like, this is terrible. Well, we knew it was going to be terrible. Well, why didn't we just not do it? Well, we didn't hurt anybody's feelings. I'm like, well, you're hurting my feelings, and you're hurting everybody's feelings here. Now I'm going to have to go hurt feelings. Anyway, just kidding. So, in other words, don't listen, if you've messed up, don't surprise me. Just let me know before I'm going to find out anyway, right? And there's that thing, again, it's a little bit of a personality thing, but this is part of being trustworthy. Trustworthy is, I'm going to deliver on my promises, and if I realize I'm not going to be able to deliver on my promises, I'm not going to sit around and hope you don't find out. I'm going to let you know beforehand. And when that happens, you don't lose trust, you gain trust, because trustworthiness isn't about being flawless. It's simply about doing what you say you'll do and letting us know if you're not going to be able to. The third commitment is, if you confront me about the gaps I've created, I'll tell you the truth. If you confront me about the gaps I've created, I'm going to tell you the truth. Now, we resist this because we're afraid. And senior leaders, let me say something to you as well, senior pastors, or maybe your education director, or your sort of staff, over staff. Oftentimes, the reason people don't come to us first and they just hope we don't find out is because they fear our response. And generally, the reason they fear our response is because they have seen our response and they have something to fear. And senior leaders, we think that's leadership. We think getting all bowed up, all powered up, and for once I know I'm exactly right and you're exactly wrong, and that never happens at home, but it certainly happened here, I know I'm finally right, and now you're going to get all powered up, and son, let me sit down and tell you, when I was your age, and you did all this stupid things where you're right, and somebody walks out and they're all beat up. You know what? Next time they screw up, how motivated are they going to be to tell you? Zero. You've just, you know what you've just said? You've said, and next time you mess up, you better do a better job hiding it. That's the message. Look, when somebody messes up and you can't change the past, why would you punish that? Why would you not want to create an environment where everybody knows, you know what? It was an honest mistake, and as soon as I tell them, hey, no big deal. The other day, you may have seen this on the internet. It was up briefly. We had a fire alarm. First service a couple of weeks ago, and I'm up here, and this, you're not going to believe this. I got eyewitnesses, hundreds, to tell you the truth. I'm giving an illustration about fire. I promise. And I said it's about the forest fire, and it starts with a match, and a little match burns the whole forest down, and because you apologize, it doesn't make the forest come back, and how could something little bitty as a flame burn out, making this big fire, and the fire alarm goes off. So half the people think, oh, cool illustration. It's like, boo, boo. and the lights are flashing. I'm like, I can't believe this. I mean, right in the middle of service. So we have to exit. Okay, fortunately, we'd taken the offering. But anyway, we had to exit. Everybody had to leave. Right? See, those of you that are so spiritual, we don't take an offering. We just have a basket in the back. You'd have missed your whole week's offering, not us. We got the money, okay? Send everybody out, all right? Business administrator was happy. I only preached half a sermon. Everybody's excited they got to get out of church early. It was a win. So anyway, so we now, imagine this, we have to evacuate this entire building. Now, we have a fire drill like plan like you do, hopefully. If you don't tell anybody. But we'd never, practice it. And come next Sunday, we're going to have a fire drill. You got, I don't know how many, 3,000 children and, 700 middle schoolers, and they're all going this way, and they're going this way, and we got to make all the adults go that way. And, of course, my baby. It's like, no, ma'am, you got to go out of the building, my baby. Fortunately, didn't have a lot of that, and they're out there. It was really kind of funny because if you're out there in the back, you can look through the glass, and you see your baby going out that way, but we're making you go that way. So there's all that parental separation thing, So we didn't know how it's going to work. So we have to evacuate the whole building. So, of course, what I'm thinking, what happens? So then somebody sheepishly comes and tells me middle school had a hazer and it set off the fire, the smoke thing, I'm like, So how happy are you as the middle school director that you're in charge of that? You had a band and smoke and, set off the whole thing. So it's kind of like, you're going to tell Andy, And I thought, why would I be mad about that? We had the offering. No, that had nothing to do with it. Why would I? And kiddingly, one of our guys, Jason's like, can I come to work tomorrow? And the message got to me, and we kind of laughed about it. But I thought, why? Yeah, it was a big interruption. I mean, it's complicated. When you have video church and you miss a service, it's complicated. But you know what? That was no one's fault. And I found out why it happened. It was no one's fault. Now, here's the deal. Listen. In corporate world, of church world, there's 3 levels of blame. You're going to blame a person, you're going to blame human nature, or you're going to blame a system. You're going to blame a person, you're going to blame human nature, you're going to blame a system. Blame a person. He should have known better. You come in my office tomorrow morning, and son, do you realize it cost us? And it cost us. It actually didn't cost us, but it could have cost us. And we did this, and a video, and a banner, and internet. I mean, who gains anything from that? And I would have been right. You blame a person, you blame human nature. Well, anybody in middle school, they're all a bunch of immature people running around middle school, If you work, blame human nature, or you blame a system. We had a system problem. It's nobody's fault. But the question is, when there's like a big interruption, here's the question to ask. What is the first line of response from the people who are responsible? Is it, oh my gosh, they're going to kill me? I mean, nobody looks forward to going and explaining, we set off the fire. I mean, it's not like a joy, but in other words, what kind of culture have you created? Because the healthier your culture, the quicker the information gets to you and the more accurate the information gets to you. Now, senior leaders, let me ask you, do you want your information fast or slow? I want it fast. Then you've got to create a culture of trust. Do you want the information to be absolutely true, or do you want it to sort of get hedged along the way so you won't get too mad? Well, I want to know all the truth. Then you have got to create a culture of trust, because trust impacts what gets communicated, when it gets communicated, and how it gets communicated. And those of us in senior leadership, we set the tone for that. Now, if you have a temper, ain't nothing you can do about that. God gave you the temper, I guess. I don't know where it came from, but you know what? So what if you have a temper? You just learn to go lose your temper somewhere else. It's okay, get in your car and scream, or, write an email and delete it, or send it to somebody else to delete, But listen, don't bring all of that negative energy to bear on people you have hired to work with you in your organization. There is no win in that. There's a temporary win because you feel good, by golly, you were right. There's no win because that tone trickles all the way down through the organization. And where there's no trust, it's hard to leverage the gifts and the talents and the abilities of the other people on the team. Didn't mean to go on and on about that. Okay, Roman number 3. Harboring suspicion and mistrust will eventually poison, is the word there. Harboring suspicion and mistrust will eventually poison the culture of your organization. This is kind of gross. Letter A. There are things that grow and multiply in the darkness, and there are things that grow and multiply in the light, right? Other than carrots and potatoes, can you think of anything that grows and multiplies in the darkness that you'd want to eat? I mean, when you flip over a rock, You're not looking for something to eat. You kind of jump back in case there's something under it, right? Things that grow and multiply in the darkness are generally not good things. Things that grow and multiply in the light are. Number one, the things that grow in the darkness can't survive direct sunlight. Things that grow in the dark are generally unhealthy. So consequently, letter B, when you choose not to trust and refuse to confront your concealed suspicion grows and poisons your attitude. See, suspicion is like something under a rock. Suspicion is like something under, a piece of plywood that's laid out in the backyard for too long. Suspicion is something that grows on the inside of you and eventually spills over into your conversation about those people. Suspicion is never a good thing to carry around. There's not one good thing that comes from carrying suspicion around in organizational life. To finish that, your attitudes, this is huge, and I've learned this the hard way. Your attitudes about the people in your organization are telegraphed. People know. My leadership team knows the people that I have a hard time trusting, and I've never told them. I've never had a list. And by the way, just to make sure y'all know, these people in the organization I have a hard time trusting. But you ask them. I've never asked them. But if you ask them, they tell you, you know what? High trust, pretty high trust. How do they know? Because I'm telling you, I don't care how careful and smart you are, your attitudes get telegraphed to the people that work directly with you. And suspicion and a lack of trust gets telegraphed. People know. It's not really a secret. You've never talked about it, but it's not really a secret. And the longer you carry the secret, the more it grows and the uglier it grows. And then by the time you're ready to talk about it, you talk about it with a little bit too much energy. Letter C. That's just a nice way of saying you're just mad. Letter C. The consequences, let me look up here a second. Okay, I know this is a whole lot. See, in church world, we got our values so screwed up. We have confused sensitivity with dishonesty, okay? We think we're being sensitive, we're being dishonest. We think we're being kind, we're just not being truthful. If you're carrying and harboring suspicion about somebody that works with you on your staff and you've never talked to them because you're trying to be sensitive, you're not being sensitive, you're being dishonest. You are poisoning your culture because that stuff gets telegraphed. It just does. And things that are brought out into the light generally lose their power and they lose their ability to hurt your culture. Number one, the consequences of confrontation are tangible. Letter C. The consequences of confrontation are far less severe, is the word there, sorry. The consequences of confrontation are far less severe than the consequences of concealment. We think it's the opposite. We think that by keeping it concealed, that, if I talk to her about it, that she's going to blow up. If I talk to him about it, he's liable to quit. We're so afraid of the consequences of being that transparent. But the consequences of concealment are far worse because that's what poisons your culture. Honest confrontation doesn't poison a culture. Transparency about what happened and didn't happen doesn't poison your culture. It's awkward. People cry. People lose their temper. People go home early. It's lots of emotion. And some of you, that just stuff kind of scares you to death and confrontation freaks you out. But the consequences of that are far, far, far less severe than I'm just going to carry around my suspicion, because concealed suspicion is poison to your soul and it gets telegraphed in the organization. Number one, the consequences of confrontation are tangible, immediate, and impact only a few relationships. The consequences of confrontation are tangible, you see it, they're immediate, we had that conversation, and they impact only a few relationships. Number two, but the consequences of concealment are intangible. This is why you have interviewed with churches and on church staffs, and you just go, there's just something wrong there. It's intangible. Listen, it's like something that's rotten in your disposal, and you just, it's just in there. That needs to go. You don't know what it is. You just know it's bad, right? And you can flip a switch, right? But in church world, you just go, that's bad. I just don't want to work there, right? Or now you're on staff and the interview that was just like, next to heaven working here, right? And then you got there. It's like, this is bad. And you can't put your finger on it. Listen, it's that intangible, I don't know where it's coming from, odor of somebody carrying around something dead and rotten that hasn't been exposed to the light. The consequence, number two, of concealment are intangible, long-lasting, and they can impact every relationship in your organization. The consequences of concealment are intangible, long-lasting, and they'll can impact every relationship in your organization. I wrote in my notes, the longer you wait, the madder you'll be, and when things are eventually confronted, you may over-communicate. Anybody here ever over-communicate? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. All right, letter D. As leaders, we must learn, and that's the key word there. As leaders, we must learn to fear the consequences of concealment more than the transparency of a culture built around trust. Last page conclusion. Listen to this. You've preached on this passage. Do you have this in your notes, the Matthew passage in there? Yeah. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar and first go and be reconciled to your brother. Then come and offer your gift. In other words, before you worship, make things right with your brother. We don't just worship. We're the ones who create the environment for worship, right? Whether it's kids or adults. We're not just worshipers. We create the environment. We lead worship. If this verse is relevant for somebody who's just coming to church and mad as heck as the guy, and then the Bible says, okay, before I come in there and worship, I got to go make it right. If this verse is relevant for just random people out in society who have something against somebody, what about a church staff? I mean, can we sincerely and authentically create, incredible, relevant, irresistible environments of worship? When we have something, not just against our brother out there in the neighborhood association, because, he wanted to build a pool in the front yard, and we're like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not a big deal, but I go to your church, and, all that kind of stuff, or he fired your daughter, but, he's a deacon, and you can't fire the pastor's daughter, all those things. Come on. If we work on a church staff together, and we have something against each other, and we're concealing it, and we don't want to talk about it, and we talk to other people about it, but not them, is that any kind of invitation for God to bless what we're doing or to be a part of what we're doing? I don't think so. You don't think so. We know better. So the beginning of great staff, the beginning of great culture is making these two decisions. I'm going to choose to trust you, and I'm going to choose to be trustworthy. And when there's a gap, you'll hear about it from me before you hear about it from anybody else. And when what you experience is not what you expected, hey, we're going to have a conversation, and I'm inviting you to come talk to me. In fact, please don't sit on it. Please don't bury it. Please don't talk to it. Let's just have that commitment. Let's just have that decision between the two of us. Years ago, Randy Pope came and spoke to a staff at a staff meeting, and he said this. Randy is at Perimeter Church not too far from here, and I love Randy. He's been a mentor to me for years. He said this to had a little group of staff. He asked this question. He said, are the relationships around this table worth exporting to the rest of the congregation? That's a good question. Are the health and the nature of these relationships, is what's going on between you as staff members, is this what you want going on between the people in your congregation? And if you've embraced trust and trustworthiness as a core value on your staff, then the answer is yes, because you can pretty much survive anything if that's the case. So at the end of your notes, I wrote a few questions for evaluation. And then after we do this, we're going to go into a time of communion where we can really evaluate. Here's the questions. Number one, are there people in your organization you have a difficult time trusting? Are there people in your organization, on your staff, you have a difficult time trusting? And number two, is it your issue or theirs? Do you need to look in the mirror before you look out the window? Is this your issue or theirs? And let me tell you what the answer to that question is, even though I don't know you or them. The answer is it's probably a little bit of both. It's a little bit of your background, and it's a little bit about, you didn't confront them the first time, and you didn't confront them the second time. In fact, you've never even really confronted them. You just don't trust them. You've never even really had the conversation, but you're harboring mistrust. See, that's a little bit of you, as well as maybe being a little bit of them. Number three, what can you do about your part? What can you do about your part of the equation? Because you see, the temptation is to say, I need to go sit down and tell them, I just don't trust you. But before we do that, good leaders don't do that. First, you've got to own your percentage of the problem. And maybe the only percentage you can own is, you know what? I should have come to you the first time and I just got too busy. I should have come to you the second time, but I thought, well, you're a completely untrustworthy person, but you know what? My part of the equation is I didn't respond immediately. Because come on, we're leaders and we're busy. And it's just going to work itself out somehow. Number 4, what do you need to address with them about their part? In other words, what's the part that you need to talk to them about? Number 5, who do you sense has a difficult time trusting you? Who do you sense on your staff has a difficult time trusting you? Why? And what can you do about it? I'm just telling you. I think if we could get this right as church cultures, contemporary, traditional, bright, dim, quiet, emergent, you know what? I'm just convinced of this. Outsiders, unbelievers, unchurched people would get amongst us and they go, I want that kind of relationship. I would love to work there. I would love for my wife to work there. I wish we could create that kind of culture where I'm just telling you, if we could just get this right. And again, I don't think this is 401 or 501. This is just basically love one another. Oh, brilliant idea. Who said that, you know? Let me close with reading you this. This is in my notes. It's not in your notes. And then this is just what I wrote. We're a group of imperfect people who've been selected by God for a very important enterprise. Our success does not hinge on our perfection. We can survive mistakes. We can survive bad decisions. But we cannot survive a culture that is void of trust. My challenge to you as we have a few minutes just now together to reflect is, would you please do whatever you can in the quietness of your heart to prepare to begin giving to every single person on your staff the gift of trust. I'm choosing to fill the gap with trust. And the gift of trustworthiness. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I'll do it. And when I realize I can't, you'll hear it from me first. Would you just in your own heart, as you kind of do a 360 with the people that work above you and beside you and below you, if you're a senior pastor, everybody kind of works with you, however it is, would you just in these next few minutes just kind of tune out everything and say, God, how do I get to the place where I can sincerely and consistently can give to the people around me this gift of trust? And God, would you pray this, God, as you look at our whole staff, even if it's just the team that's here, would you just do whatever you have to do to where our culture is characterized by trust? You see, it's no coincidence. It's no coincidence. Think about this. That our relationship back to our Heavenly Father, that our reconciliation to God through Christ begins with a decision to what? To trust. That's where it all begins. So if ever in the world there's a piece of real estate in your town where trust should just overflow and abound, and trustworthiness should just overflow and abound, it should be the local church. We can survive everything else, but we've got to get this one right. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, it's a whole lot easier to talk about than to do. And Lord, I know amongst those of us who are here, there's some complicated situations. There just are. It's not easy. This isn't simple. And Father, none of us are sitting here going, that's not true, that's not true. We know in our hearts, this isn't even new stuff. So Father, would you please, 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 in your mercy and grace, would you give us in these next few minutes as we just reflect upon the incredible gift given to us, the incredible opportunity that you've given to us, the times that you've forgiven us over and over and over for the same things, we've all been untrustworthy children to you. Would you just give us the insight we need to know where to take a first step? Father, I pray for every senior pastor here, every senior leader here, Father. We all want our cultures characterized by this. Give us wisdom to know what to do and give us the courage to start. Father, give us the courage to be transparent with our staff and to own up to where we've created the gaps. And Father, give us the confidence to know that when we're that transparent, it creates transparency. Lord, wherever we are on this, please give us the wisdom to know what to do. Please give us the courage to do it. And Lord, I just pray that you would raise up church after church after church and local church after local church after local church, that the staff relationships are just characterized by such a high degree of trust that men and women from the marketplace all over the country would begin coming to us saying, teach us how to build that kind of culture within our organizations. And that, Father, this may be the new evangelism as we just learn to love one another the way that you demonstrated and called us to do. And Father, to the best of our ability, we'll be obedient and we'll walk in it as we learn to fill the gaps with trust and as we learn to be trustworthy leaders. We pray all of this, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.